And so that's exciting, just the ability to create more social experiences. I think that's one of the things I always feel like people have a misconception about blockchain technology. It's like, if you don't see it first as a social technology, you will miss the forest for the trees.
Hi everyone, welcome to yet another exciting episode of NEWFORUM. NEWFORUM is a community podcast inviting visionaries, creators, and investors to spark accessible conversations on the topics of crypto, the metaverse, NFT, and everything Web3. And in today's episode, I have a super special guest, Simon. He's a CEO and founder of Untitled Frontier, a platform that explores the intersection of storytelling and Web3. Simon is a full-stack developer, coded games in high school, websites in university, and blockchain since 2013. He also co-designed the ERC20 Ethereum token standard and invented token bonding curves. Currently, he's enjoying coding NFTs plus generative art. Simon also writes and makes music. And I can't wait to chit chat with Simon about the human experience in Web3 and the power of storytelling through Untitled Frontier. Hey, Simon, thanks again for joining us on this episode.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction as well. I'm excited. This is I love this topic, so, I could talk forever. So thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Awesome. So, you're like impressively a well-rounded person, and I am curious to learn about your background, experiences, and how you transitioned from perhaps Web 2 to Web 3.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's the thread in my past that's always been sort of the thing that stood out was that I'm a creative. I enjoy making things. So, when I was a teenager, like I played around back then when Flash was still a thing. I tried to make little animations, games had these map making tools, and then I started coding games, made music. So it's just always like this thread of just enjoying to create things. And so that's been sort of the core thread all along. And so, whatever the current new exciting thing is, I like to try to play with it because it presents this opportunity to explore and make new interesting things. So, in high school, it was like I enjoyed making games, but games as a medium for me was also great back then because it encompassed many things. You could be an artist, you could be a coder, you could make music for the game, and I enjoyed playing in all those domains. Then when I got to university, this was at sort of late 2000s, mid 2000s, it's like Web 2 was just becoming this big thing, and like growing up in South Africa, it was just like great. You're like, you look at what's sort of happening in Silicon Valley, and you're like, that's so exciting. Like, look at them building these new things. And it was also the era of what they called the mashup, which was people were exploring. It was the first time that these Web 2.0 platforms made available APIs so that you could like mix data together. You could like get someone's Twitter login and then do interesting things with it, and then send data here, like cross post this thing and that thing and combine data. And so I got very interested by playing around with those tools during that period. And then it was just like this playful period of startups and web mashups, and everyone was excited. And then mobile came along, and everyone was like trying to play with what's the new mobile thing we got to do. So it was just kind of this natural progression of following the interesting trends. And then around 2011, as one does, I was just like browsing the web, and I found Bitcoin on this forum, and I was just very curious about it because it just stood out for me. It's like, what? People making this kind of money thing, but you also have hardware that like runs computations to mine this stuff. And I was just very interested and fascinated by it. And I think, like many people, when they first saw that at that point in time, there was this sort of strange epiphany. For me, it was like a slow rolling epiphany. Like every day I just kept thinking about it. It's like, wait, I actually really need to understand how this works. So I read the white paper, and it's like, this is really great. And then you start snowballing the sort of implications of like, what if this works? What else becomes possible? Those sort of second order thinking. And then this was like 2011, and then I was still finishing my master's degree, but I did a master's degree in socioinformatics. I studied like how people deal with information overload. But during that period, I also did some coding on the side. And then in 2013, I started coding in Bitcoin because that was the only thing that was around. Like nothing else existed. It was extremely difficult and it wasn't ideologically friendly to developers as well. It wasn't made to be a development platform. And so obviously when Ethereum came around in 2014, that just made me so super excited because I saw all these possibilities and I wanted to use this technology to create these new things. But Ethereum was both developer friendly. It's like, we're making this for developers. You don't have to like put this round peg in a square hole here in Bitcoin, but it's also ideologically friendly. It was about making a platform for developers. So it was also like this more inclusive experience, pragmatic about what's it supposed to be. So yeah, then from that rabbit hole, I got involved in 2014, 2015, was one of the early employees at Consensus. And I was there for 4 years and then eventually left in 2019. And I guess that's like the other part of more recent past about how I got into storytelling and whatnot. But yeah, that's the sort of process about my background. Enjoyed creating things, got into Bitcoin because it was also this sort of nexus of interesting things of economics, politics, philosophy, computer science, and then got swept up to where I'm now, where I'm Web3.
You have that's such a rich background, right? And it's really nice how you sort of like, some people might be interested in programming and or very specific things, and then they sort of like, they kind of give up on their other passions, right? But I like that you kind of found a way to kind of combine everything, and I think that's really admirable. And speaking about being a writer and everything, I'm curious to know like what led to you founding Untitled Frontier, and what impact do you hope to make through the intersection of storytelling and Web3?
Yeah, I think so. It's like there being this thread of enjoying being creative was like a big thing for me. And sometimes you were actually right about the thing about how people choose to specialize versus not. And for me, it was always a difficult thing to sort of this difficult stress that I had about wanting to enjoy creating different kinds of things, but feeling like the world is forcing me into a certain direction. And so there was always like this back and forth. And like one thing that I felt that I could do through all this process of being a creative was actually just write about the stuff that I was doing. That thing would always be there. So, whether I was making games, I could write about my experience of making games, and whether it was, making music or like writing about music, I could share that. I could write about writing. And then I can also write about the ideas that I had and still have about crypto and Web3. And so it's like writing was like the thing that kept me all these disciplines connected to a foundation. But then I realized that one of the reasons why writing was so profound was that in the process of writing for me, it's this process of formalizing my own thoughts and realizing either this didn't make sense or yes, it made sense. And the process of writing actually sort of formalizes the thinking. But then once you have it out there, you can like invite emergent participation by sharing these things that you've written down. So just sort of this bonus, right? It's like I got what I wanted by formalizing my thoughts. Oh, and by the way, let's share these ideas, see what people think about it. Like, is my own ideas even that good or bad? But that entire process is really just a process of learning how to tell a story, because writing a nonfiction blog post about sharing an idea, like, oh, here's the idea for the token bonding curve. Like, you need to learn like the many ways in which whatever you're writing could be ambiguous. It could be like poorly formulated. You could be saying things that's not relevant. And that's learning how to tell a story. And so through this thread, I was like, listen, like, if I enjoy making music, coding, enjoy speaking on stage, like enjoy like writing, all these things are actually just learning to be a storyteller. Like at all these steps, you have to learn how to say what you need to say in such a way that either people get what they want out of it or make them feel something. And that was the thread. Like, storytelling is actually the thread. It's not writing itself, writing is the medium, but storytelling is the true sort of discipline that you're actually really interested in, and something that means that you can still be creative in so many ways. You can take up photography or painting, but you're still a storyteller at the end of the day. The fundamental thing here is being a storyteller. So in 2019, when I left Consensus, at that period of time, it's about 6 or 7 months where I had this idea for a book, a fiction book that I wanted to write. And I enjoyed writing fiction in high school. In fact, some of my favorite classes in high school was like English. We were asked to write essays and fiction essays. And that was my favorite class in school. And so it's like, great, okay, let me actually try this as a discipline, to be a storyteller. And so 2019 and 2020, I wrote my first novel, a sci-fi novel called Hope Runners of Gridlock. And it was an amazing experience. I really, really loved it. It was really great. It was great juxtaposition to being a coder. And I was like, great, this is the stuff I want to keep doing. I want to become a better storyteller. I want to write more stories. And at the same time, I can still continue doing NFTs, still stay in crypto, experiment with this new medium, which at that point was like bubbling under. And I had to combine the two, and that's what led to Untitled Frontier, is like experimenting with storytelling and experimenting with Web3. And you asked about the impact of combining these two together. And I think the thing for me is that one of the reasons why blockchain technology initially excited me was that it had this promise of being a way for creatives to create more. One of the first things I thought was, wow, we could just get people paid more easily, right? Like growing up in South Africa, like when I made games in high school, I was a teenager and I was in South Africa, which meant it was incredibly difficult for me to even figure out at all how to sell my games online. It was something that was accessible for me from South Africa. So it's like, wait, this is just a tool to get people paid more, but what else can we do with this stuff? So the common thread really with my approach to blockchain technology has been like, what can we do with this for creators? And so the goal with like storytelling Web3 is to say, look, there are a lot of good writers out there that can't necessarily get a good publishing contract. They're not really making money from short stories. Like very few people are making money from short stories. In fact, it's usually just a platform for people to get maybe noticed, and then maybe get a larger publishing deal. And the goal was really to say, can we use this technology to support more writers writing cool fiction? And this was also in relation to, I think it was Lee Jin that wrote the sort of 100 True Fans idea, where if we can find like 100 people that will buy, say, NFTs from a writer, that could be enough for them to support their lifestyle. So it's like a superpowered Patreon kind of subscription revenue model, but it's like people buy NFTs from the things that writers create. So the impact really, if this stuff works at a large scale, is that we'll have more stories to tell, and we'll have more people able to tell stories, and they don't have to then go get a publishing deal. They don't have to like sell away their rights, and they can get a fan community that really supports what they do. It's like still the promise of this long tail of the internet and supporting creators. One of the things that I feel why I feel this is great for creators generally is that what you want to get from your fans or the people that enjoy your work is to find the fans that are willing to pay more than what you actually offer in alternative mediums. So a good example is, if you're currently an author or a writer, who sets the prices for the books being sold, right? It's probably your publisher, and then they will also work off on what's like market research data. And Amazon might choose for you what your price is, and that's it, right? So it means that there's probably a lot of fans that would probably pay a lot more because they really appreciate this, and they're trying to find ways to do that because they want to support you and what you're doing, but they can't, right? So there's one person might pay, for example, when I sold my novel, I did pay what you want, and one person paid like $100 for a copy of the book, and some people paid nothing, right? And that's fine, right? So like that's the kind of thing. It's like, or pay what you want, but the fact that you're allowing people to pay $100 means that you get those fans that really like what you're doing and they want to support you doing more of it. That model strangely doesn't really exist much in the rest of like how traditional publishing works. Like Amazon will choose for you. If you do subscription revenue stuff like Patreon or Substack, there the creator also chooses. There's like the $5 tier, the $15 tier, or whatever. So they need to figure out what they think their fans are willing to pay. And the only places where there's like really this kind of this price discrimination is in merchandise, somewhat, right? So you can go like, hey, here's like a limited edition t-shirt run for like the new band, the new album coming out for this band, and that's where they make sort of their margins. But they're still also, again, setting the prices. So there might still be a super fan like that goes to their band's new gig and they're willing to pay like $1,000 for a t-shirt, but you're not allowing them, you're not giving them the opportunity to say, I really, really love you. I felt so many beautiful things from this music. All you're allowing me to do is pay $20 for this ticket. Just so that's the goal, but there are certain trade-offs. Like we do understand and recognize, yes, with NFT you can get price discrimination because the price can fluctuate in value, but that also brings in speculation. Not all speculation is good, not all speculation is bad. You kind of want to in like harness this energy into the right avenues to make sure that, like, yes, the fans get what they want. We get more creators being able to do more, but not trying to minimize any additional new negative externalities, like, oh, maybe people lose money because they thought they could make money from buying this new author's books and whatever. It's like the goal should still be, at the end of the day, that I feel, at least with NFTs, is like people should buy them not necessarily because they want to make money, but because they enjoy the collecting, they enjoy supporting what it represents. And if you maybe make money from it, maybe you were a super fan really early and now like this story universe is the biggest new story universe, then you make money from it. That should be the bonus, really, not the purpose. But that should be harnessed in different ways. Maybe there's like protocol level stuff, maybe there's like language and wording that you use, the way you design the economics, that I feel you can harness it in the right direction. But yeah, that's still ultimately what I think is valuable. Is just like allowing more price discrimination across the world, to have a writer in Indonesia be able to be supported by a super fan in Brazil.
This is great. And also you tweeted something. You said, if you build a wholly new city or state by only catering to elites that want to exit from the complexity of modern life, that society won't last. Now, I'm not sure if I connected this right, but it got me thinking that, like, in the context of building like innovative Web3 tools to benefit society, do you think it is catering to just a group of people, like a specific group of people? And like, how can we ensure that the masses aren't left behind and can be a part of the narrative?
That's always been, I feel like, a difficult problem to solve. I've always also believed in the ability for these kind of technologies to support people in new kinds of ways, right? So again, like social tokens, for example, is a way for a person to leverage their own future without necessarily having to rely on taking on like bank debt or some other ways. Like, hey, support me now, you might benefit from my success in the future, right? So it's like just more tools and ways for people to leverage what they're capable of by themselves. So one of the things that I've sometimes struggled with is the way that's been progress, because I've been fortunate to see the industry grow from like 2011, 2013 to where it is now. It's like sometimes the industry grew quicker than we wanted, which resulted in the fact that the early adopters were a certain like demographic group, or like a certain kind of person that now owns, like, say, it's now super wealthy, and they might be perpetuating the lifestyle and goals that they have, right? So it's like, oh, maybe initially it was just like a bunch of like male like nerds that like really love this stuff, and now they're like rich, and now they're maybe perpetuating the same stuff that they like or whatnot, and that is detrimental, right? So you want to include more people in what this is able to solve, but sometimes the technology grew faster than we anticipated, so we didn't get this technology in the right hands soon enough for it to make a broader impact to more people. It's talking of like wealth creation and what wealth creation has happened. Like this is a $1 trillion asset class that took 10 years to occur. But it's in that sense, it's like difficult sometimes to thread that. But I think we're also now in the position where there's a different kind of problem, where now you have more people coming on board in many different ways, but there's still this allure of like, oh, like you can make money from it, so I'm participating because I can make money from it, not necessarily the other benefits from it, like, oh, an NFT for a way to connect between fan and creator, but it's just like, oh, there's this gambling casino feeling to this entire experience, which could also be detrimental. So, I mean, I don't have the right answer to that, and it's stuff that I've been thinking a lot about personally as well recently. It's like, it comes into broader questions of politics and philosophy. It's like, for example, in the US, you have the accredited investor laws, which can protect people, but it can also be detrimental because you're perpetuating status quo, where you're saying only people that have money can invest in new risky things. So you're saying, you poor person, you are stupid, you can't invest in new things because you're going to lose money because you're stupid. And that's incredibly condescending and patronizing and like wrong, right? So you have to find a way to balance these two things together by saying we're allowing people to take individual risk, but also ensuring that like we reduce like negative externalities that come from it, which includes things like, we should point out obvious scams, like we should point out obvious Ponzi schemes, like we should point out and make sure that if people use institutions that have risk, like centralized exchanges, that they are reasonably regulated to ensure that they don't run away with people's money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Crypto is also broader global, it's part in a broader global conversation, is also recently important because of the fact that it's like saying, like, how do we continue to support humanity through this maybe period of turmoil with climate change, a pandemic, like changing world politics and stuff like that. It's like where does crypto fit in? It needs to be a tool that supports people, not that exploits people. But
yeah,
that is it's 2022 and we're still learning, right? We're still figuring out what this should become.
Exactly. I do kind of have some sort of a peace of mind when I think about the fact that when the mobile phone came around, it was just very specific people using it. And now everybody, can own a phone. So
yeah,
perhaps it's going to evolve that way where it's going to be more accessible to especially the emerging markets. And eventually everybody can be a part of it. But I think one thing that like I believe is powerful, I mean, of course, is the power of storytelling, and storytelling in itself can be like a way of educating. That's the reason why, I mean, I was really drawn to what you're doing when I checked it out and everything, because that's like a great way forward. And I was also thinking like, what would you say, or how would you define like human centricity and in Web3, and how will the metaverse elevate the human experience? Like, are there any unintended consequences?
One of the promises for me about the online as a space, and also more narrow, the metaverse, is that it's a tool to sort of escape from things that don't necessarily we are allowing people to do in like modern life, right? And this is broadly the case. Like if you say live in an oppressive country where you can maybe express that like you're queer in an oppressive country, like being able to be fully queer online in the metaverse space, that's a safe space. That's great, right? That's what we want. And if people can experience this positive energy, they can bring that back to their physical locations, localities, and say, like, I'm allowed to be free in this online space. I am not going to tolerate any more than I'm not free in my local space. So it's this way to show futures that we can bring from like the online space back into like local realities. But there's again, like there's always these trade-offs, because on the other hand, I think what we sometimes lack in sort of in 2022 is that if we're only mediating our relationships online, we tend to lose a sense of like humanity and relationship to the people around us. It's easier to say to someone like you're an asshole or like you're an idiot online, but like if that person is standing in the room next to you, you might see some of their humanity more, even if you disagree with them, right? So there's a saying in crypto recently where people say go outside and touch grass, right? And that's like literally the case. We should sometimes I think sometimes the pendulum swings too much into one direction. It's like, yes, there's all these positive things that come from having free and open online spaces for people to express who they wish to be and who they are, away from like oppressive local experiences. But if we're only mediating our relationships online, we lose some of the sort of more material, physical interactions of like community life, of local life, of relationships to family, to local culture, that I think it's also important for us to go and say like, look, like, yes, like there is a lot of stuff to be angry about online. You will never end. There's like, you literally go every single day be angry about something, because there is a lot of stuff to be angry about, but you can't reach the end of that, right? So you have to like mediate that experience to go and say, okay, you know what, let's find a balance here somewhere. So I think it's both good and bad, and sometimes that's not the satisfying answer. But in the online and the metaverse, the goal and hope is for people to be able to find spaces, but also to make them realize that if they have those great spaces online, that they're able to, or should be, bring it back into local realities, hopefully.
I love your perspective. And well, since we touched a bit on like, I guess, online communities and Web3, I'm wondering like what has changed, because online communities have always existed. And some will argue that like a DAO is no different. It's just like a hyped name of the same concept. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think what's changed is over the course of, let's say, like the decade or two, from like early internet through to Web 2 to what we have now, is that the world has come online. Like most of the world is online now, or like still coming online, and we have the entire world on public online forums, right? And I think that brought its own kind of like change in how culture works, how we see each other, for good and bad, right? So today it is way more likely than ever before, where if you traveled anywhere in the world, you could find something to connect to or recognize culturally than previously. Like you could go to Mexico City and like hear music that you just heard when you were in Kenya, right? So it's like that is more likely the case, and that's a good thing. But then it also, again, talking about the thing of localism and like local geographies, that also maybe have resulted in the loss of certain local cultures. So there might be cultures that only existed because they weren't able to be online, right? So now that people go, hey, everyone in the world has watched a Marvel movie, so you can talk about Marvel, but then who's talking about local film from your local city, right? So that's kind of the stuff that I feel like it's lost in a way. It's like, again, good and bad. And with regards to DAOs, sometimes I think one of the actual underlying sort of positive aspects of Web3 and crypto isn't necessarily that we're using Web3 to like add like abilities for people to coordinate with money and value, but just like allowing people to reimagine collective action online, right? So even if a DAO is just sort of like, hey, it sounds like this hype fancy thing where we're sharing money together with a multi-sig and we have this vision, it's just the fact that it allows people to imagine that we can do collective action online is part of the big benefit of it. Even if it ends up looking like this janky Web2/Web3 middle ground, kind of like it's not really decentralized, but it's just about people going and saying, oh, like I think we've forgotten that we can do good collective action online, and say, the early era of the web, where it was just sort of, hey, people were hanging out in forums and making things together and whatnot. It got replaced by the era of the Web 2.0 feed, and now we're sort of waking up again from this like feed, the way the feed like made us like robots just looking at the feed entire time to going and saying, wait, we can actually do cool stuff with the web. We just kind of forgotten. And like Web3 is like dragging us into that direction again by saying, just imagine you could do collective action across borders, across cultures. Let's figure this stuff out, what the way that we want the world to work. But so that just the idea that we're making people imagine with DAOs is, I think, one of the more important parts. But even just the idea of having the simplest DAO of like a multi-sig sharing some ether together and sending it to wherever it needs to go is in itself still a very nascent idea. It is still a very powerful nascent idea that even just the fact that you can share bank accounts, right, is a powerful idea that still hasn't done enough change. So I still think it's still an incredibly valuable idea. And yes, I feel like with the way Web3 and crypto has changed over the years, some stuff happens quicker than we expect, and some stuff happens slower than we expect. So with DAOs, it's like, I think sometimes the hype runs ahead of its value, but that's also okay. It brings people forth that can help us imagine what it should be and what we can do with it.
I agree. And I'm always curious to know, like, do you think like every creator in Web3 should be a part of a DAO? And how can DAOs actually make the onboarding process more efficient and accessible to upcoming creators?
I wouldn't say every creator needs to be a part of a DAO, but I do like the way the DAOs kind of like feel like the sort of pre-internet local scenes, right? So, one thing that I always lament the loss of, again, with like the loss of local culture, is like back before like, let's say MP3, like maybe in the era of the MP3, but before streaming music, right? Really, like you had this ability for, or like local scenes, there would be money circulating in a local scene. Like you would be selling a CD at your show, and that money the band receives, they then go and buy the next band's album that they see, right? So money circulated in like a local economy through cash and like physical goods. But then digital streaming meant that money exited the local community and went to a Swedish company or like an American company and like exited the community, right? And that money didn't end up circulating. So you had like this loss of local culture and local scenes as a result of the fact that the money went up and out of those local scenes. So the value of DAOs in that sense is like feeling like it's recreating the local scene, but online in a way that DAOs can support local creatives in their sort of sphere of interest. So it's like you get like DAOs that support like autonomous artists, it's like, or DAOs that support like public goods funding and stuff like that. So it feels like just like a mutual support system that is new, and that's exciting. So in that sense, like it's more really about the social value rather than saying necessarily the economic value that's being generated. The feeling that we're here to support each other, not sort of we're islands.
Exactly. I think also the beauty of getting like real-time feedback, I think it's really powerful. And I'm not sure if this question connects to what we just discussed, but it has to do with creatives. And so I'm wondering, like, how does the concept of collectibles change the relationship between creatives and supporters?
Yeah, I think that principle isn't new, but it's been superpowered, right? So in the past, like, you've had the band selling the merch at their shows. That necessarily doesn't create a strong connection. It really only creates a strong connection between the fan and the musician if it's more for the fan, because they feel like they keep their what matters to them close to their heart. Like you're literally wearing a t-shirt. But then it's also valuable for the fans to go like, hey, if I walk around and somewhere and I see someone with the band's t-shirt that I really like, it's a warm feeling. It's like, someone also loves this thing that I love. Maybe you strike up a conversation. So that's always been there. And even similarly to like sci-fi merchandise, buying the lightsaber or like buying the Jedi robes and like going to cosplay and going to conventions and whatnot. That kind of experience also existed. Even when you look at paintings, right? Like if you see someone, you walk into someone's home and they're fortunate to be able to buy physical paintings, and you see them having, say, a great painting, you're like, oh wow, it feels like you're talking to me. This is a language. The painting is a language, and you're saying something to me by having that there, because I also appreciate it. So it's like the ability to create new kinds of language, a way for people to communicate with each other. With NFT based collectibles, what's really being added is that you're making it the act of ownership more transparent. So that means that the creator can see who owns what, and the fans can see who owns what, and there's like just additional transparency and provenance to these collectibles, that you can create like more social experiences in different ways, whether it's between fans and fans, or like fans and the creators. And that just makes that relationship more clear and more transparent. And that's really nice. I think some creators might not want that. That's okay. But I think for a lot of creators, that's an exciting idea, just to be able to go and say, hey, there's this channel that's now open, and do with it what you want to. But there's even the ability to cross-pollinate as well, by going and saying to, hey, like, we see this as now within the NFT collectible space, is like people doing this cross-pollination. This community has a whitelist for that community, or a allow list for that community. They can like get on board, and like people share things together. And so that's exciting, just the ability to create more social experiences. I think that's one of the things I always feel like people have a misconception about blockchain technology. It's like it's if you don't see it first as a social technology, you will miss the forest for the trees, right? It's this stuff only works because it's a social technology. The fact that we all believe value together, that only works because it's mediated between people.
How does blockchain, peer-to-peer sharing, and smart contracts disrupt the creator economy, and how would this impact the future of work significantly?
I feel like sometimes, and I don't know why that's the case, but I've always felt like I could see a bit into the future and see what's coming, right? Partly because I was also trying to invent it. And for a long while, I was like, this is what I think is going to happen. And I feel like a lot of that has come true. And so now I don't know what's coming. For some reason, for some reason I can't see anymore. And maybe it's just because I'm spending more time outside recently.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah. So in that sense, it's like before NFTs really like became a big thing, I was always worried that this technology would remain in the hands of people that cared about technology and people that cared about finance. And now suddenly a lot of its success comes from people that care about culture. And it was a bit of a relief realizing that this actually finally happened. Like, great, there's also now a big cultural component to this technology, cultural and social component. But I feel like the promise of it for the creator economy, this is what it was supposed to become, but we're now still at the early stages of what this looks like, right? So one example that I sometimes find jarring is that the marketplace is still seen as the gallery as well. It's like still got the same experience. So, if you create collectibles, sometimes people just point people to go look at this stuff on OpenSea. But the OpenSea experience is first a marketplace experience, it's not a gallery experience. Everything there is embedded in price information. And yes, it's good and bad, but you're still going to a marketplace to look at art. And I guess maybe that's true in some cases. Like, we go to art shows to go look at art, and people buy art and whatever. But like that in itself is still sometimes jarring. So I think context will change as well, and how people view NFTs. And maybe the name NFTs also goes away. It's one of those things where I didn't anticipate it would pick up as being like the thing that we call it. And that might cause its own troubles. Like, we don't call like music anymore MP3s, right? So like now it's just like you listen to music online, wherever that is. So in that sense, I don't feel like I 100% know it's coming, except that whatever it's supposed to be, it's like it's on its way. We will see more people creating more cool stuff. We will see people experimenting with new kinds of cultural formats, and then we'll take it from there.
I guess time would tell. There's like a quote by Gabby.eth. It says, I enjoy being public online because I can look back and see how many views have changed over time. An example, I used to believe we needed to make Web3 mainstream. Now, I increasingly feel we should build for Web3 natives. And when mainstream goes Web3, we'll have done our job.
So I tend to agree in a certain sense, because it's only from my personal experience of building some of this technology that's both the infrastructure level, but also consumer-facing level, is that I feel like the times when we really try to make things simple to understand by doing like a lot of hand-holding and like creating like new kinds of using old metaphors and stuff like that, people were confused about why it mattered. And we had a lot of debates because like I was part of the Uja music team, and we were some of the first people doing music and blockchain stuff. And like a lot of the conversations that we had was, how much of the engine should we show to like the consumer, to the user? And we couldn't make up our mind what this would look like in the future, right? But a lot of the value comes from the fact that people realize this is different. So that's always been kind of the difficult thing. Is like, okay, maybe the idea of like getting a credit card to buy crypto to interact with the thing just to cater to more mainstream users actually didn't help us, right? Not back then, at least. Maybe now that's what needs to be done. But solve a problem for a specific kind of person first before you go and solve a problem for the broader audience later, right? It's kind of like the Tesla approach, which was, build a fancy car for rich people first, and then get to like affordable everyday car for more people. So the people that are going to care about this stuff now, and at least in the past as well, are people that go like, I want to experiment and try something new. So that's part of the process. And I also think sometimes we forget the difficulties that we had in the past with new technologies now that we take for granted. Like even just the idea of like username and password. It's like we all have emails, and at first that was strange. Or even like, oh, remember the days when you had to like get this modem and like this like you had to have a contract with like the telephone company and like just to like read headlines. It's like, why would anyone do all this effort just to read headlines? So I think this stuff will solve itself, and I think it is better to cater towards a subset of people who actually care about the stuff now, and then get to onboarding more mainstream people further down the line. Yeah, it's just the easier sell, to be honest.
I mean, it's interesting to, I guess, the fact that NFTs have gone mainstream, right? Yeah. And sometimes people think that Web3 has gone mainstream because they kind of like, when you hear Web3, you just connect NFT, Web3, everything is kind of mashed up or merged. Some people just don't even know the difference, right? So, yeah.
But like the NFT example is a good one, because like when we were building some of the first NFTs and stuff, we were like, we shouldn't call it NFTs because people have no idea what this is, why they're going to understand it. Let's call it something more people will understand. Like it's called digital collectible, right? And it's like, but the problem was, if you say digital collectible, it doesn't distinguish between like an NFT or like a sword you get in World of Warcraft. It's like, it doesn't distinguish why it's different. People have done digital collecting, like games, or like you collect pictures in Pinterest or whatever. It's like people have done that mental model, but now it's like you're saying, oh, we're doing digital collectibles. They don't know why it's different. So the name NFT was like, it was separate enough in its definition to pinpoint to something that's new. So I think that sometimes the lesson here is like, sometimes it's useful to cater to existing metaphors, but if the metaphor doesn't explain why it's different, you're not getting people to adopt the technology. So that's why the name NFT got adoption, because it was the thing that related to saying a digital collectible that is mediated by blockchain technology, right? That's included in its definition, sort of how people understand it. Like no one's going to go, like no sort of online game is now going to make like their virtual items called NFTs if it's not actually on a blockchain. No one's going to do that, right? So now it's like distinct enough to say NFTs are stuff that's mediated by blockchains, and that's great. So it's like it's a good lesson there, I feel.
That makes a lot of sense, and thank you really so much. I don't know if you have any like last words or last few words for our community or anyone listening to you today. Any advice?
Support the creators. Yeah, support the creators. Yeah,
I love that. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Simon, really. And where can our community find you on your social platform?
Sure. I have a very unique name, so you can probably just Google that and then you'll find my online presence. But more directly, just Simon DLR on Twitter. And my business is Untitled Frontier, and the handle is UN_Frontier. So Unfrontier.
Thank you again, Simon. This was super insightful, and yeah, I got a lot from it, and I know that everyone who will be watching this will feel the same. And thank you all for being a part of today's forum. If you want to get more involved in our community, make sure to follow us on our social platforms. IG is newcoin.nco, and our website is newcoin.org. And you can also join our Discord community. We'll have all the links in the description below, and don't forget to share, like, and subscribe to our channel. And we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.
Awesome. Thank you.